Welcome to the Legion Strength and Conditioning Podcast. You can check us out at legionsc.com or follow us on Instagram at legion.sc. All right, we're going to be talking about requests from athletes in terms of programming, which as a coach is sometimes super valuable. Athletes often have some insight and some intuition about like what's going well for them, what's not going well for them, what they need to work on, because they're the ones doing the workouts. They're the ones who know how they feel when doing different like qualifiers or competitions or even just in training. And so if they have insight there, like that's super, super helpful. And a lot of coaching is trying to open up the communication channels for that insight to get funneled, right? And then you as a coach can try to help guide the athlete or guide the program to address those issues. Simultaneously, there can be some challenges with athlete feedback because sometimes athletes have an idea of what they want to work on that you as a coach are like, you know what, I just really don't think that's the thing that you need to focus on. Or I just really don't think that the way you want to work on, say, improving your squat strength is like the right way to do it. And so, based upon that, when you're coaching, you sort of need to be able to simultaneously encourage feedback, get a lot of information from athletes who you're coaching, and then sort of have the relationship set up in a way where you can actually filter that feedback and then provide guidance or make adjustments without sort of just being like, I'm not going to let you do anything you want because I think everything you think is stupid and wrong. And that's, that can be a difficult dynamic sometimes. So today we're going to just talk about how we as coaches try to balance that. And Luke, I know you have some thoughts on making this work.
Yeah. So I think with my coaching previously, when someone would ask me for them to be starting to do something or do a little bit more of something else, I used to be pretty, I'm not say like abrupt, but I used to be pretty blunt and say no. And I suppose as I've got more experienced, I've been a little bit more concerned with them applying themselves to training continuously, and then sometimes feeding into a bit of some of their requests, because I definitely do think it is important. So I think whereas before, maybe I was a little bit too concerned with writing out programs and then performing them, and it sort of being almost this sort of like test, do the work, retest type format, whereas now I'm a little bit more concerned with it being a continuous process and it developing over time. Some of the things I think is definitely important to understand when someone is requesting is, first of all, their experience level. So I'm a lot more on board with an experienced athlete saying like, hey, I want to work on this. I didn't feel great doing this in the competition or a qualifier. Could we potentially implement that into training a little bit more? I think with that as well, sometimes you just need to maybe give them a couple of touches on it in training, just so that they can figure out a way to get their heads around it and get their head around the challenge. It doesn't necessarily mean like writing a full progression of it. So if someone says there's a certain movement they want to work on, then it's like, okay, let's just try and pinpoint a couple of points within our training over the next few weeks where you can actually have touches on that. And sometimes that sort of appeases their request, and that's sort of what they want to do. But then if, say, for example, a beginner is saying, oh, I want to work on a deadlift program, or they see something on the internet that they want to do, and they're just curious about something, then I'm a little bit less likely to feed into that. I think time of year and with an athlete who is actually preparing for competition is important as well. Now people are coming off the back of like quarterfinals and things like that. I'm a little bit more open with like them, throwing in some bicep training or something like that. Is it going to help their performance in CrossFit? I don't know, probably not. But is it something that they just want to do before they go to the beach in the summer? And I've heard continuously, I want to look like I do CrossFit. So in that instance, it's like, yeah, sure, like crack on with it. As well as that, you've got to sort of think of what type of thing they're requesting and why. Is it something that is driven from performance? Like I said, is it something that's driven from sort of curiosity, or is it just because they watch a load of YouTube videos and they see people doing that type of stuff, and they think that that's what they need to do to sort of be a quote unquote competitor? Because I definitely think that a lot of requests sort of come from that, where they see other people doing, say, a blog program, or they see their favorite sort of athletes on their YouTube channels just throwing down and doing really hard stuff all the time and doing lots of CrossFit. And generally speaking, people are like, oh, I've got to do more of that. I think one example is, I'm working with a sort of more of a beginner level athlete at the moment. And she sort of wants to be practicing things like rope climbs and handstand walks and things like that. And we actually need to develop a little bit more base level strength. And there's a little bit of educating around there where I need to say, like, hey, for you and where you want to go within your sort of competitions and things like that, it's going to be a little bit more practical and a little better use of your time if we start just working on you getting some of the basic gymnastic skills before you then start looking at things like rope climbs. But that is like something that we could potentially implement for, say, 10 minutes on a Saturday before she does like a throwdown workout, where it's just something that she can get her groove with, have a bit of an understanding of it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be something that's included in training pieces or in workouts every day of the week. So I definitely think there's a lot of things there, but I think the experience level is definitely the biggest thing that I consider when someone is requesting things. And I think based off of their experience level, you're also going to get different types of requests. The requests you're going to get from a more experienced athlete is going to be usually driven from some sort of performance that they're wanting to improve. Maybe it was an actual experience they had in competition that they don't want to have again. And I do think that those things are very valuable.
Yeah, I agree that the kind of time of the season makes a difference for how flexible I'm willing to be with people. So if someone is basing their training around the game season and their goals are to get as far as they can in the game season, at this time of year, if they're not currently training for semifinals or the games, it's okay. I don't mind if you want to try doing some other things. I don't mind if you want to do this like specific squat cycle. Like I write a program for our competitive athletes at our gym, and a guy said to me the other day, like, hey, I want to kind of work in a hatch squat cycle during this next training cycle. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. If you think that's going to be enjoyable to you and benefit you, then that's okay. The cycle is mainly right now built around strength for them because they're in the off season and they're going to be doing predominantly strength work. But when there is more time until competition, I have less worry around people adding in stuff or wanting to do stuff that they think they're weak at or they think they need to get better at. I think there's also a difference between those kind of people and people who don't have competitive aspirations. So if you're coaching someone who is a person who just wants to be healthier, get stronger, look better, there's always a balance there between doing stuff they enjoy and doing stuff they need. And if allowing them to do something they enjoy more is going to keep them working out and keep them moving the needle forward, then great. Even if it's not the optimal program for them. If they want to, work on their handstand walks three days a week, okay, that's not going to have too much of an effect on what else we're doing. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to have fun. Great. Let's keep doing that.
Yeah, I think that you're both touching on something really important there with like experience levels and understanding the psychology of the athletes and what's going to actually maximize their sort of like desired behavior over time, right? Not that we're some sort of like master manipulator, sort of like, okay, what behavior do I want from you? Like, how do I trick you into getting it or whatever, right? But the reality is that people get results from repeatedly doing certain kinds of behaviors. And our goal as coaches is to set them up in a situation where they can do those behaviors consistently over time. And if someone really, really wants to work on a specific skill or really thinks that they need to do a certain squat cycle or something like that, and you as a coach are this sort of like oppressive parental figure telling them that they can't do the thing that they want to do, that's not going to set them up for doing like the appropriate behaviors over time that's going to get them the result that they want. So even if there is a potentially better program that they could follow than whatever they want to do with like a hatch cycle jammed on top of it, like that the choices aren't between the best optimal thing that they could possibly be doing and the kind of like wrong thing that they want to do. The choices are between the kind of wrong thing that they want to do and them getting so frustrated that they just like quit working with you or decide to just go off and do their own thing anyway. Right. So like those are kind of like the choices that we're dealing with. So, we have to think about how we want to communicate with people if we think that they are trying to do something that doesn't necessarily make sense for them, and like Luke said, I think that we've all probably in the past been like, that's a bad idea and you shouldn't do that. Like, we're going to do this instead. And then over time, you sort of learn like, oh, that actually doesn't work that well. Right. So what I've sort of started to figure out is that people are pretty good at recognizing problems, but they're not always great at coming up with the solutions to those problems, right? So if someone wants to do some sort of additional squat cycle, or they really want to focus on certain kinds of skill work or whatever, that can be like a valuable signal as a coach of like, okay, what do you think is going on? And like, what problem are you trying to solve by this? Is it that you just don't think you're strong enough and you see that your strength numbers aren't where they need to be relative to other competitors? Is it that your legs get tired when you do like a lot of thrusters? Is it that you feel like your pulling strength isn't there, like in longer conditioning workouts with a lot of muscle ups? Like, what are you actually trying to work on? And if you can sort of get at what the problem is that they're trying to solve, that can be super, super helpful, because they may have some like pretty deep insight there, right? I think, Luke, you mentioned this and you're just like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, if you had said something about that, then that would have actually been like super, super helpful to know earlier, and we could work on that. So I often use feedback or suggestions from athletes as sort of like a jumping off point to figuring out what problem they're trying to solve. And then if they want my input on that problem, I might be like, listen, like if you want to improve your squat strength, I think that's a great idea. I have concerns with potentially using this like high volume percentage based cycle designed for weightlifters just on top of a CrossFit program, because I've seen that go badly for people in the past, and here's all the reasons why. But if you are in fact like set on doing the hatch cycle, like, I'm not going to tell you absolutely can't do it, right? Because sometimes there's an element of like, you have to sort of like burn your hand on the stove yourself to learn that like, yeah, actually maybe I shouldn't do that. And if you as a coach can sort of set people up to do that in a way that is like a little bit more reasonable than what they might do on their own, like that's fine. But I usually try to empower people to make that decision. Like, listen, here are the concerns that I have. Here's things that I've seen work better in the past. If you do want to do this, watch out for these things. What do you want to do? And then we can do that, right? It's fine. We can allow athletes to have some autonomy like that.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like there's like a worry of how people who you're coaching remotely are hitting the intended stimulus of a workout? Like, do you worry that they're kind of missing the point of something? Often when you're watching someone in the gym, you can kind of tell pretty quickly if they're approaching it wrong, or they're trying to go at it too fast, or they're pacing too much, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're coaching remotely and someone's just doing it by themselves, it's sometimes hard to know what they're doing. And the results that they then put in to tell you how it went aren't always going to give you the full picture either. So do you guys ever get concerned about how people are executing the program you're giving them?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges with remote coaching, is that even if you do get results, you do get some split times, you do get some videos, you don't actually know what's happening. And even in like coaching within your own gym, right? It's like, okay, like, yeah, like I'm not going to watch you do literally every single workout that you do. And you know that people are doing things wrong, like for sure, 100%, right? Because I think that all of us who've been coaching for a while, you have an athlete who you've been working with for a long time, and then they send you a video of a certain movement, or you actually see them do something. And you're like, whoa, how long have you been doing that? And they're like, always. And you're like, oh no, like that's what you were doing for a glute ham raise? Like, where'd you get that? Like, shit. Like, oh no. Right. It's like you've been doing all of your glute ham raises that way. Yeah, for sure. Okay, like for years. Yes. Oh no. Like, yeah, I mean, like people don't necessarily film their accessory work. You don't always see them do their glute ham raises, and then you finally see it and you're like, uh-oh, this isn't what we wanted. But on sort of a zoomed out level, John, I mean, I think you're even just talking about like the stimulus of the workout. And I've seen plenty of athletes in my gym or otherwise who are following, say, like a blog program, say they're following a Comp Train or a Mayhem or a Misfit or whatever, and you're watching them do the training from from that blog program, and you're like, if the coach who wrote this program saw what you were doing right now, right, they would lose their minds. They'd be like, oh no, like no, like this is not what's supposed to happen. Right? It's like people are doing EMOM snatches at like a tough whatever weight, no misses, and it's just like they're just lining up and they're just missing literally every single rep going for a PR on like 100% of their EMOM snatches. And whoever wrote that EMOM thing would just be like, "Why? Like, why? How did you arrive at this? Like, this is completely opposite of what I intended from this programming." But oh well, right? So in the remote coaching setting, there is the constant challenge of just sort of like educating people on how to train, or like how to execute the things that you're writing down and how to get the intended stimulus from it. And John, to your point, I think that a lot of challenges in terms of people improving can be them just like always getting the wrong thing out of it, right? That they always go too fast when they're supposed to pace. They always pace when they're supposed to go faster. They race on the wrong movement from the conditioning piece and blow up on the thing you want them to sort of knock out. You know, they go too heavy, they go too light. Like it's just happening all the time. And you know, there's not necessarily a great solution to that. But I guess I'm curious, like what you think is helpful there in terms of getting like feedback from athletes to help them sort of like guide their training.
Yeah, I mean, I think even just seeing the results can be useful. And you can kind of tell from a result if someone has hit things the right way. But I found myself getting more and more descriptive in my programming. So the notes I add on to a workout will kind of break down the workout in pretty high detail. So, you know, if I put up a workout here, it's got strict handstand push-ups, it's got bar muscle-ups, and it's got overhead squats. And I'm kind of giving like ideal rep ranges for things. So, you know, they're doing sets of 18 on the overhead squats, and it's at a light to moderate weight. But the goal is for them to stay unbroken on the strict handstand push-ups. So in the notes, I'm putting, okay, the target is unbroken handstand push-ups. If you need to break the overhead squats to stay unbroken on the handstand push-ups, that's fine. Right? And I'm trying to be as descriptive and give the focus of the workout to them so that they, going into it, they know what they're trying to do. And so I also put down, it's okay to have a little extra rest before the strict handstand push-ups if that's going to allow you to go unbroken. Rather than, you know, jumping straight on the wall, getting out half the reps, coming down. You know, take a little bit more time beforehand. We're trying to hit big sets on this today. So I do find myself getting more and more descriptive as time goes on, because I have a specific idea in mind when I'm programming things. And, you know, I think we've talked about it before where not every workout has to have a purpose per se. And, you know, we don't need to be over-analyzing everything. And there are some workouts where I'm not going to give too much description because I just want them to get through the work. It's not, you know, we're not specifically targeting one thing in a workout. But if I am targeting it, I'm definitely putting that in the notes and making it clear to them what we're trying to accomplish. And, you know, again, sometimes you don't know if that's worked. Sometimes you don't know if they followed those directions exactly. And, you know, the kind of people that give you the result of completed as opposed to any other data whatsoever. And you don't know if they've done it how you intended, but the more you can give them, the better. And I always tell my athletes, the more feedback you can give me and the more notes you put into your results, the better. Because, you know, we're going to be able to constantly refine. If you just put completed, or even if you just check it as completed and don't even write anything, you know, I can only assume what happened, and I'll progress you. That might not be the best way. I might try and push you too hard. I might not push you hard enough. But if you give me more feedback, I can make sure that these workouts are progressing you, and we're moving forward with them.
I think the sort of the detail on the program is something that I developed after a while. I definitely think that in my early coaching, I was just writing workouts, and I was sort of expecting them to be essentially just like performing them, and hoping that them doing the work is basically gonna create some result. Whereas now, I think we're sort of all of the understanding that it's not necessarily just about what you do, it's also how you're doing it. And I think that we see that with athletes as well. We see athletes who will put lots of information up, and they understand that that is useful information. Sometimes it could be too much. Sometimes I think people can look into stuff a little bit too much. But I also think that when someone is given a little bit too much feedback, that's always a lot better than someone just sort of ticking boxes, essentially. And the person that is ticking boxes in their results and stuff, I always do worry about how they are doing it. But I'm also aware that they view the training process as, I turn up, I do what I'm told, I get on with it, and then I'm going to get better. And I think that this can be quite difficult, especially with more experienced athletes, is that if they have that type of attitude, then they're going to get stuck, because it's, like, progress is going to slow, and you're going to have to take sort of a deeper look into everything at a certain stage, to the point where you are really breaking it down. You are really trying to communicate what's happening. We're trying to communicate what they need to be doing in the training. They're communicating back what is happening as well. And we're teaching them about the process as we do that, which is going to create autonomy. I definitely think that some people just want to be told what to do, and they sort of think, I'm an athlete, I just operate, I'm like a robot, I do what I'm told, and all this type of thing. It's like, that can sort of work if you are very, very talented, and you're able just to do lots of stuff and just continuously progress. Or it can work if you're very new to the sport and you're quite resilient. But I think after a while, you have to make sure you take on this sort of understanding and this lens that the process and how you do it and how you communicate that back, and then this dialogue that occurs through the training and through through sort of weeks and months and training cycle after training cycle, and this is sort of where the requests come through as well, right? If you are communicating, if you are having like a good back and forth with athlete and coach, then you're going to get insights and things like that are going to be very helpful for you as a coach. And this is where you can then, you can start taking these requests a lot more seriously than if someone is sort of just ticking boxes, going through their training, doesn't give you any feedback, and then all of a sudden it's like, I want to do this squat cycle. And it's like, well, why do you want to do that? So I think that the autonomy thing is super important. And it's just sort of an understanding that the training process and working with a coach in this setting is super back and forth. And that back and forth is really what creates the success of the training program long term. It's not necessarily just about test, perform the work, retest, okay, regroup, what do we do wrong, what do we have to do next? I definitely think that was what people thought remote coaching was a long time ago, and I know that that's where a lot of coaches start off, because it's sort of what they know. But then when you do gain experience, you just sort of start to pick up on these conversations that you're having with athletes, sort of time after time, and then you're going to come across like problems that you've seen in other people, and you're going to know how to sort of navigate that. So I definitely think that this back and forth is really critical.
Yeah, I think that this idea of sort of like communication on a day-to-day level, like we're talking about in terms of communicating results, coaches communicating the priorities during a training session, giving sort of like guidelines of what to focus on and what not to focus on. And then the sort of more zoomed out level of like, hey, what do you want to work on? What do you think is a weakness? As an athlete, I want to do this squat cycle, or I feel like I need to do more chest to bar in workouts or whatever. That back and forth feedback loop is kind of like what the coaching process is about, right? And to sort of try to tie together all the things that we've been talking about. The idea is that as a coach, we may have some insight into mistakes we've seen other athletes make, or sort of like best practices in terms of like progressing certain features or combining different things that may seem difficult to improve at the same time. And so as a coach, we want to give that information to athletes, but simultaneously the athletes are the ones who are actually experiencing their training. They're the ones experiencing the competitions that they're participating in. They're the ones that see how they stack up relative to other people and how they feel about that. So they have important insight and they have important suggestions to make, but that they can basically just give that to us as a coach, and then we can try to give them feedback on how they should progress that. And sometimes we're wrong as coaches, right? So there is value in athletes actually saying, you know what, like I need to work on this. Like I need to do more of these kinds of things. I want to do this cycle. And as a coach, we may not like it, but sometimes we have to just say, you know what, give it a try. Let's see how it works. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. And I think the trust, like in both directions, is what makes that kind of relationship work.
Thanks for listening. While you're here, go ahead and head over to your podcast player, subscribe to the show, give it a rating, give it a review, all that good stuff. You can also go ahead and click through to the show notes where you can find out more about us at legionsc.com and also follow us on Instagram at legion.sc.